Hey guys, you know who it is. Thank you for clicking on this video. You are about to enjoy a cool little tourney bracket that I did with the NFR boys on an episode of their podcast. There are more bits of this podcast and videos and content from it that you can watch if you enjoy this one. We will link over to their YouTube channel down below so you can check that out. And shout out to them, shout out to you, shout out to me. And yeah, that's it. You're the best. Enjoy. Ba-bam.
Let's do a bracket for rappers. I'm here with two Anthonys, and the first matchup is Kanye West versus Lil Wayne. What are we saying, guys?
I want to go Lil Wayne on this. You know, rap capabilities, let's say. Like, I feel like also he has a super underrated, like, discography when it comes to his mixtape game. And I feel like as an MC and, like, skill-wise, I would give it to Lil Wayne.
I think bar for bar, Wayne's the better rapper, but when we're looking at catalog, it's got to be Ye.
Right. Are we just basing this off of, are we taking everything into account or just rapping ability?
Like, you could take everything into account, but I feel like the rapping ability, like, who would pass for me, I would probably give it to Wayne.
Right. I mean, like, if Wayne and Ye were in some kind of head-to-head, literally just like microphones in front of each other, Wayne would smother him like a baby in a crib.
Destroy him.
Completely just like utterly destroy him. But like, as far as personal preference, I'm like an albums guy. You know what I mean? Okay. I'm like a big holistic, like artistry kind of big picture kind of guy. And like, while Wayne does have like that endless waterfall of, you know, one-liners and double entendres, like the guys seemingly could rap forever.
Absolutely.
But by that same token, like I do kind of prefer like an overall artistic vision, and that's what kind of Ye has kind of given me over the years, and that's what I personally gravitate toward. You know, so
even in terms of like messages and substance within the lyrics, I feel like Ye
exactly. So it's like I would go more Ye.
Okay, so Ye moves on. Next up on the same side, Eminem versus Lupe Fiasco.
Okay, so
two big time lyricists.
This is hard just because like I know a lot of people discredit the second half and portion of Eminem's discography. Obviously, stuff like Revival and stuff like, let's say, Music to Be Murdered By. I'll never put that into my rotation. But
pretty awful.
That three album run of Slim Shady LP, Marshmallows LP, and the Eminem Show, and even stuff like Relapse, which holds a very close place to my heart. I'm a super big fan of that. And like, as I do think that like Lupe Fiasco bar for bar might be a better MC than Eminem, when it comes to the catalog, would I revisit more? Like you were just saying, I would go on the side of Eminem. How about you?
Like, I know that, you know, it's fashionable and it makes sense because I've done it to jump into that kind of prefix or that preface where you're saying like, oh, you know, we know Eminem has put on a lot of bad stuff, but I mean, Lupe does have his Lasers era as well.
Yeah,
like,
that's very true.
We can't, while he did bounce back from that and he made much better albums to follow, like it's not like he hasn't had his low points too.
That's very true.
I mean,
I think he still has more duds.
Yeah,
Eminem has more duds. I think.
No, for sure. Eminem is just kind of a steady downward slope. You know, it's like with some hills and valleys, but it's really in the dregs. Whereas like Lupe has bounced back. You know, I'm just kind of saying like nobody's you know, infallible. You know what I mean? Like Lupe doesn't have like the most perfect track record either. But with that being said, like record for record, I probably personally enjoy Lupe more, though I do have to like, you know, acknowledge the fact that like Eminem has the influence, the trailblazing factor.
Absolutely.
You know, he's so unique in terms of an artist. You know, maybe it seems like less so because he is simultaneously one of the most copycatted artists on the planet, but I feel like you have to kind of like look at him in a vacuum at least a little bit because he's not in control of who's copying him and
absolutely
whatever.
Not.
You know,
Yeah,
he didn't decide for that to be the case. He just made the music that he did, and it was as successful as it was.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think in terms of originality as an MC, in terms of better freestyling ability, I would go Eminem. You could say Lupe is a bit more technical to some degree in terms of just his lexicon, his vast vocabulary, all that stuff, but I think I'm siding Eminem on this.
I am siding Eminem with this one. How about you? What are you going with?
I'm gonna just try to be different here. I'm gonna go Lupe.
Okay, so listen. Okay, Eminem ends up passing on that round. That was 2-1. You see, the three person dynamic actually ends up working for us. Usually,
we have a tiebreaker.
Yeah, usually we end up have a bunch of fucking ties. But keep going with the next one.
Next up, side B, J. Cole versus Kendrick Lamar.
I'm going Kendrick. Absolutely.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about this one. Fuck
Let's keep going.
Jpegmafia versus Future. Bit of an oddball matchup.
Jpegmafia.
I'm going Future, okay?
Oh, man. I mean...
Of course you would go Future.
Yeah, I would go Future. I'll tell you why I'll go Future, you know? Yeah. And as I do absolutely respect, you know, records like Veteran and LP. And, you know, I love the unpredictability factor of JPEG's music and the messaging within it as well. Like, him being so anti-establishment to the music industry and him going against the grain is beautiful to watch and witness. But from my personal rotation, it's not an everyday thing. You know, as I appreciate the art and as I think it's super unique and well calculated, like Future has been in my rotation since I was
Now, why is Future more of an everyday thing for you?
I just feel as if it's a lot more simplistic and digestible as a listen. So example, like, you know, simple 808s and like, let's say simple production while still having this beautiful layer of quality behind it, the producers behind most of his music. So let's say going back to Southside and Metro Boomin, some of my favorite producers from that generation, you know, their best projects in my opinion that they've handled lie in stuff like 56 Nights and DS2. Even let's say the iconic songs that I've gotten over the years, like March Madness, like A Stick Talk. Those are some of my favorite songs from hip hop that have ever come out, and they lie within his discography. So I feel like my bias has just come into this factor.
Now, when it comes to me, like I like a bit more variety in overall listening experience, whereas like I feel like I'm getting much the same thing from Future to Future record.
Yeah.
But like I was just listening to Jpegmafia this morning and a lot of the day yesterday, his EP2 project, which is one of his more melodic projects, which is like a little bit more of like an R&B blend. I think it has some of his catchiest songs on there. Like This One's For Us, I think is fantastic. Panic Room, I think is fantastic. You know, just like a lot of good, kind of very low key, chill, melodic cuts on there where he's saying some catchy shit. He's saying some slick shit. I don't know. You know, I get what you're saying, like in terms of the digestibility, but like I think Jpegmafia in his own way can be just as catchy.
Absolutely.
He could be just as catchy. I just think that like Future, what he did for hip hop, the doors that he opened for trap, for psychedelic trap, I don't think we would have the amount of artists that we do right now thriving.
Yeah, if we're talking impact, it's Future.
Impact for sure. I think in terms of even consistency, Future's obviously had a bit of a longer career, more classic records, you could argue.
But I'm going to butt in there and say this, though. Like, I do feel after, you know, Self-Titled and let's say even Hendrix in 2017, not that there's a bit of a dip off.
Wizard
like,
was cool, bro.
Wizard was fire, but like I don't take Wizard and put it up next to something like Monster or a 56 Nights or a DS2. Whereas if I feel like even something like I Never Liked You, you know, yes, I have songs in like 7:12 p.m., Chickens, you know, Puffin' on Zooties, but to talk about longevity now, I do feel rather than an upwards trajectory, maybe the music is taking a bit more of a decline from my personal rotation. So I don't know. It's up to you guys. I would probably go Future on this one.
And, you know, that's why I would love to have this conversation, let's say 5 to 10 years from now. Because the thing is, like, a lot of what Future does is just so fueled off of a trend. Whereas, like, what JPEG does is so specific to him and not sort of like purely based in anything. That shit is going to sound as listenable and as fresh and as unique and as idiosyncratic now as it's going to sound like 5 to 10 years from now.
That is facts, absolutely.
You know, that's what's ultimately I think is going to give it staying power.
But I will say this about Future, though. At the end of the day, like, yes, he does, you know, ride certain trends and that he does go with certain things. But I also feel as if he's kind of the guy that set those certain trends back in 2013 to 2015 phase when he was releasing those types of records. That's true,
but depending on what the trend, that could matter or not matter. You know, it's like take into account that you're wearing a freaking MF Doom shirt right now. And I remember when MF Doom was first getting off the ground, nobody gave a shit about MF Doom. And the only people who did were just like weird white Adult Swim nerds. And that's it. And that is it. And now he's considered like top 5 for most people, like just, you know, even dudes like Drake and you know, Yassine Bey and Tyler, you know, formerly Mos Def, know him and, you know, appreciate him and like praise him and, you know, literally put his work into their work in like really overt ways. And that's the staying power that can come with like being a unique kind of underground, kind of trailblazing kind of dude. And, you know, with JPEG, I think he's kind of showing himself to have that kind of staying power.
Yeah, someone that's going to get more appreciated down the line just because of like the subtleties within the influence that we're only going to see like once time ends up taking its course and once we see the type of music that's coming out from that scene. Okay, so listen, I'm officially going with Future though. What do you guys got on this?
You know what? I'm going to side with you. Jpegmafia is going to move on. You convinced me, man. You convinced me. Okay, Jpegmafia moves on. We have now Kanye West versus Eminem. Semi-finals.
Well, I think as a pure lyricist alone, like I'm definitely going to have to give that to Eminem. And I'm going to want to go side Kanye on this one, even though like a lot of my personal preference as a listener does go into the Slim Shady LP and the Marshmallows LP. I keep talking about these fucking projects like a broken recorder. But I mean, it's true, you know, like you can't deny the impact and the success and also the quality that were put into those types of records. But Kanye also has those types of runs in his catalog as well, like talking about, the whole college dropout, the graduation run, talking about the 808s era, MBDTF, which we're going to talk about in another recording, like the Life of Pablo era, the Wyoming runs. Like, Kanye also matches up those iconic eras next to Eminem, so I would probably
But here's
go
the
Kanye.
thing, though. If we're including everything besides lyricism, what are you really giving to Eminem? Because in terms of impact, influence, it's Kanye West. In terms of
That's very debatable, bro. Like, I think that, like, yes, obviously, like, it becomes a generic answer when people ask who's the most influential of all time. The two people that I hear the most are Wayne and are Kanye West. Okay, those are the two people that I hear the most. But in my opinion, like we were just talking about before, the amount of people that have wrote off the impact and success of Eminem's music, and the amount of people that have gone into that lane and have decided to be different with what they were doing, the type of content matter they were bringing in, not feeling like they have to be locked into a certain box. I mean, man, there's so many different people. I mean, even looking at the big three now, like a Kendrick, J. Cole, and Drake, the big three that influenced the whole fucking generation, some of their biggest influences come from Eminem material. So, while yes, I do feel like Kanye's had a ridiculous influence all over this generation of music, Eminem has done it equally up to par, at least in my opinion.
No, I mean, what you're saying about Eminem is true. It's just kind of interesting. When we're talking about like influence and impact, so much of hip hop is like self-referential.
Yeah.
And Eminem's popularity and impact has almost kind of transcended the genre itself.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? He's like pretty much the McDonald's of hip hop. And I feel like slowly Drake is kind of replacing him in terms of that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
absolutely.
So, I mean, like there's going to be a changing of the guard with that eventually with time. It's just going to take a little bit longer to like kind of fully transition over to that. But like with Eminem, his influence is obviously massive and in my opinion, unparalleled. It's just that we don't hear a lot of it in the underground necessarily all the time, because it sort of seems like he's not sort of taken seriously as, the word I'm looking for is not necessarily a pioneer. Obviously, he's taken seriously as a pioneer.
More like an album artist? Or
no. He's not taken as seriously. He's not taken seriously as almost like a sage of the genre. You know what I mean? Like if Eminem versus like Jay-Z each held a press conference or had a social media, tweet spree where they each kind of gave their opinion. This is what I think about hip hop right now. Or this is what I think is, wrong with the genre. This is what I think is great about the genre. Like, despite Jay-Z having only a fraction of Eminem's sales, people are going to take Jay-Z's opinion on hip hop way more seriously than Eminem. And for a myriad of like completely valid reasons. You know what I mean? There are some things about the genre that despite Eminem's best efforts, that he's just never going to connect with or have sort of like the same kind of opinion on as like Jay-Z is going to, or have like the same kind of experience with or say over that Jay-Z is, so it's like, because of that, I feel like his influence, despite, no matter how hard he tries, is always going to be limited. It's kind of the same thing with the Beastie Boys as well. Like obviously a great group, influential group, one of my favorites in the genre, but like they haven't always necessarily been like respected in a way, because they're kind of approaching the genre as outsiders, and they kind of came into it making like party rock rap music, whereas like they had to kind of come around and make some more serious records to kind of be taken more seriously.
The other thing too is like, how valuable is that influence in the genre? Like for Kanye West, you can pinpoint it to, let's say, Chipmunk Soul, or what he ended up doing on 808s and Heartbreak. For Eminem, I mean, yes, the way that he bent certain words, the way that he structured his rhyme and his verses, for example, but you can't really pinpoint it as much as you can for Kanye when it comes to the music itself.
Yeah, but I think that's what's so mystic about like the way that his influence is kind of transcended. It's kind of more of a godfather role of the amount of people that have been able to even go into the genre. So example, like when Eminem came through,
it's the persona though. It's the antics and everything that came along with that too.
Yes, absolutely. But like you can't stick it to that as well, because that was so greatly executed upon. Like you go into the writing and the skill, like yes, the antics are there, and like there's a lot of stuff that he did back then with his albums that had a lot of people talking. But, you got them in certain, let's say formats and certain writing styles that I feel as if are some of the best that the genre has ever seen. Plus, like, yes, you can't pinpoint someone like rhyming orange with fucking porridge, like you're not going to see that every day. But I mean, just the amount of commercial success and the amount of people that Eminem has brought into the genre itself has allowed for other people to come in and trailblaze themselves, like if you think about it, what would happen to hip hop if Eminem wasn't there? How many less people would be interested into the genre itself on a mainstream level if Eminem didn't have the influence that he did? If I had to put money on it, I'd probably say a lot less. But then again, that's a hypothetical. What I'm saying is that maybe Kanye's sound is a lot more distinctible, and like you could say it because there's a tangible evidence there. But I think overall in an influence, Eminem just has us more, bro. I'm being honest with you.
I think we're trying like two kind of different influences here, because you have the artistic influence, which I think Kanye has ultimately, because when you're talking about like the standard of like what is expected of hip hop artists right now, you have to have somebody who's a songwriter, a rapper, and a singer, and so on and so forth. And Kanye kind of trailblazed for that.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And the thing is, you wouldn't have Drake, basically like the head honcho in terms of like being able to nail that dynamic down, if not for 808s. But then Eminem, you have to kind of give it to him for kind of changing the fan base of hip hop as we know it. We wouldn't all be sitting here kind of talking about hip hop if not for him kind of introducing it in the same way Elvis did in his own way to audiences like outside of the neighborhoods where it was originating as a musical style, you know what I mean? And kind of bringing it to this mainstream prominence where it was just accepted as, a thing. Because when I was a kid, I don't know if, you guys can tell me if this is a sentiment that you heard sort of talked about when you were growing up, but I remember hearing repeatedly again and again and again and again and again, be it on TV, radio, older folks, even some kids my age, like, that's not music. They're just talking over a beat. That's not music. You can't find anybody who will say that now. You can't find anyone who will say, nobody says that now. Nobody who is, especially anybody who's taken seriously, it's just not said, because like it's just accepted. It's just accept. There was a time when metal music was just considered to be, oh, that's just screaming. They're just yelling. That's just too loud. It's just, that's insane. Why would anybody listen to that? But now it's like it's just accepted. Nobody questions its legitimacy. And Eminem is part of the reason why hip hop's legitimacy as a musical style is not questioned. Because he's made music that has transcended the genre and is legitimately enjoyable, just as not even just as hip hop music, just as pop music.
Absolutely.
Literally anybody could get into Lose Yourself. Like you'd have to be a complete utter moron who just hates music to not be able to appreciate what that track does from a musical standpoint.
Or even something like Till I Collapse or like a Stand. But what's even cool about Eminem, I feel as if, is that, yes, while delivering on that mainstream front and having, let's say the commercial success that he did, what's cool about it too is that you're still getting records like Marshall Mathers example. You're still getting stuff like Amityville. You're still getting stuff like, let's say, Role Model, As the World Turns. Like there's so many different tracks where you could go into his discography. Well, yes, the album sales were led by those big singles that ended up trailblazing the charts, but once you get into 75% of the rest of the album, it's some of the most out there and obscure writing that you'll ever get out of the genre. There's still no one that's able to replicate what Eminem did with those earlier albums, or even up to Relapse for that matter, to the way that Eminem did it. So that's why, like, I think it is a similar conversation. But what do we got, Eminem or Ye? What do we got?
Eminem. I'm going Ye on this.
I'm gonna go Ye.
I would go Eminem, but I guess I'm getting jumped again.
So
Let's
Ye
keep
in the
going with this.
finals. Next up, we have Kendrick Lamar versus Jpegmafia.
I'm gonna go Kendrick.
Right off the bat, right?
I'm
Sorry,
gonna go
Peggy.
Kendrick with this. Yeah, but I think that what Jpegmafia is doing is so cool because, like, when I came up through the genre, I was more of a mainstream listener. I preferred like a lot of mainstream releases, and I was gravitating more towards there. But now, as I'm gaining more and more respect for the genre, and as I'm diving deeper and deeper, and as I open up the podcast, people like Jpegmafia keep me engaged into the actual genre just because of the unpredictability factor. So shout out to Peggy, but we have Kendrick versus Ye in the final. Listen, my Kendrick bias is going to come in here. I'm going to say Kendrick. What do you guys got?
Super tough to say. I think that, like, when it comes to Kanye West, his ability to just change up album after album has been so pivotal to just today's landscape, showing people that there's a lane in industrial hip-hop, there's a lane in gospel hip-hop, there's a lane in so many different subgenres has been monumental. I think that in terms of, if you want to count the amount of classic albums in both their catalogs, obviously Kanye's been around for way longer, but he has more classics. I think that in terms of emceeing, Kendrick gets it without a doubt. But overall, I think it has to be Kanye.
No, I'd go Kendrick on this one. And like, even if you want to look at the diversity in the music and what's being given, like, example, like the way that Kendrick uses his vocal inflections in certain instances, or the way that, he uses, like, let's say his alliteration in certain instances with the way that he like rhymes down his lines, like, I feel as a rapper, he's a lot more unique in prowess to, let's say, Kanye. But you could say that's kind of like the change of time and like where the Kanye came from as an MC rather than, let's say, Kendrick Lamar. But even album concepts, I'm giving it to Kendrick. I think consistency still to this day, like Kendrick does not have a bad project out there. Like he doesn't have like even a good project out there.
True.
Everything that Kendrick has delivered to the genre, for me, in my opinion, has been top notch in the way that he's approached it and the way that he's executed upon it. But the same could be said for Kanye. It depends where you want to go with your discography talks with Kanye. But even looking over the years, like song concepts, like a Sing About Me, I'm dying of thirst, or a Fear, How Much a Dollar Costs. Like I could write a whole fucking list of the amount of incredible tracks I've heard from Kendrick, and they almost feel a dime a dozen in his catalog. That's the weird part, is like you're getting these super unique and well-written songs, but they're all sprinkled out throughout. Like for a lot of rappers, that's scarce.
It is.
You know, you're not gonna find them besides you going, you know, let's say you want to go to an MF Doom discography or a Lupe discography. It depends where you go. But for Kendrick, I find he also has that quality that, like, you know, a Lupe will bring to the table, but brings it to more of an accessibility point.
But Kanye has that too, but it's revolutionary from an aesthetic standpoint, because
I
like
see.
as you can kind of cite those Kendrick tracks, I could also cite Heartless, and I could cite Black Skinhead, and I could cite, you know, again, one of his early like Chipmunk Soul tracks, and I could cite Flashing Lights. You know, like each one of those tracks for the moment that they came out were revolutionary for hip hop. But again, it was not from a super conceptual standpoint, from a lyrical sense. It was a super revolutionary conceptually speaking, like from a musical and an aesthetic sense.
Yeah.
You know? But still, with that being said, like this conversation is hard for the same reason that like the Kendrick JPEG, the conversation is hard, because like all these artists broke out at way different times.
Yeah.
Like what would the Kendrick versus Kanye catalog look like if Kendrick had 5 more records?
Yeah.
What would the JPEG Kendrick conversation look like if JPEG had 3 more records?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you could like really do like a head to head to head to head. So in that sense, it is kind of hard. You know, I feel like, you know, Kanye does kind of have it on Kendrick in a way, because he's had so many more influential eras, and we've had so much more time to see his impact, like, you know, take shape and take form, be it in the short term or the long term. But just in terms of like personal preference, I think I get more out of, you know, Kendrick stuff, like in terms of the substance, the concepts, like those kind of artistic statements that he, you know, sort of comes through with on his records. And, you know, that's kind of where my sentiments don't just lie in hip hop. That's where my sentiments lie in a lot of rock records as well. Some of my favorite rock or pop records are big sort of like, you know, ambitious concept albums that are making a large statement, whether you're talking about like Pink Floyd's The Wall, or,
Fantastic
you know,
record.
Janelle Monáe's The Archandroid, or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, that's kind of where a lot of my sentiments and preferences lie anyway. So I may just end up kind of going with Kendrick just because like that's kind of where his mind and creativity is at. But like, you know, I would argue that again, Kanye has, you know, that going for him as well. That that kind of like high concept, I'm going to come up with something that sort of changes the game and is unique. Maybe it seems a little less so in retrospect because it's so copied.
Yeah.
You know, it's like how many records and productions, be it in pop or in hip hop, do we hear where it sounds like something off of Yeezus?
Yeah.
You know, so many tracks, so many songs.
Even something going back to Graduation, you know, like just that type of arena music and like that type of triumphant sound has transcended into like so many different albums now within hip hop that we see. So finally, what do you got, bro?
I got you got Kendrick.
I got Kendrick. What do you got?
Kendrick.
That's it.
Kendrick wins
Lamar's
the bracket.
Fire. Let's
Yay!